What's going on, people? This is Balaji, and welcome to another edition of Demand Wars. Now, this gentleman sitting next to me, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. He is the CEO and founder of Proofpoint Marketing. He says, "Show me the proof and get to the point." Proofpoint helps brands acquire the right customers by building relationships at scale. And you're about to learn how much into relationships Mike Grinberg and his wife Gabby actually are. This is more than a slogan for these folks. Listen, Mike started as a graphic designer. That was a surprise to me, but he transitioned into marketing. He's a creative problem solver, an amateur combat sports enthusiast. I want you to put your hands together and help me welcome Mr. Mike Grinberg. What's up, Mike?
What is going on? That's probably the best intro I've ever heard. That's great. Thank you for that. Now I have to live up to the name.
Hey, listen, your reputation precedes you. I've been enjoying your content on LinkedIn and enjoying the Proof Point show. Yourself and Gabby make a wonderful pairing, of course, in business and apparently in real life as well. It sounds like you guys had some really good family time over Thanksgiving.
We
If I
did, we
recall
did.
correctly, Mike, did you all recently move across country a few months ago?
We did, yeah. We made the trek from Minneapolis to Phoenix back in June. So enjoying the desert.
That's phenomenal. You share a lot of pictures of the desert over there. It looks beautiful. I haven't had the opportunity to visit, but I'm looking forward to making that trek shortly.
Don't
Um,
don't do it in the summer, but right now it is beautiful.
okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Before we jump into the demand wars questions, Mike, uh, I've been intrigued by your approach, yours and Gabby's approach to your podcast, where you that slogan of "Show me the proof, get to the point" is really a distinguishing one. It seems for Proof Point Marketing. You guys share the results, you get right down to brass tacks, and you actually go through a very structured way. You talk about mindset, you talk about skill set, you talk about tool sets, and it's almost like a formula. Why are you so intent on this particular mode of analyzing marketing?
But it's interesting. So we actually the podcast not too long ago got rebranded as the Master Marketer Show. So we went away
That's
from
right.
show me the proof, get to the point. Interestingly, pretty much as soon as we did that, our listenership jumped pretty significantly. So it just became more searchable. That was the main reason why we rebranded, or one of, because nobody like this is sort of the pitfalls of branding, right? It was clever and interesting, but I don't know that anybody understood that it was a marketing podcast that didn't know who we were, right? So that said, the format stayed that way, and it is. I don't want to call it formulaic. We do focus on mindset, skill sets, tool sets, results. I can't take the credit for that framework. We heard it from Steve Watt, who was on our show at one point. He heard it from I can't remember who, so it's been kind of passed down, if you will. But the reason we do it that way is because I do believe that it, at the very top, you have to have the right mindsets. I think that's true in anything, not just in marketing. Um, you mentioned us, being all about relationships. That is the name of the game for us, if you will. And I think there are specific mindsets you need to have if you're going to focus on relationships as the core of your marketing strategy. So that's just one example, but that's why. And then from there, it's you know skill sets. What do you need to do to execute against it? And then tool sets, which is where I think a lot of folks like to focus, whether that be Martech or whatnot. That's pretty much last. At the end of the day, a tool is just a tool, right? You got to know how to use it. Um, so that's sort of why we do it that way. It seems to work.
I like it. I like it. As marketers, we're often charged with finding that unique selling proposition, that thing that distinguishes us from the rest. And I think Proofpoint is really off to a great start. I'd love to dig a little bit more into this idea of relationships. I saw you talk recently, Mike, on LinkedIn about how uh, buyer journeys are perhaps not as a relationship journey. Now, the idea of a buyer journey has been a little bit maligned over the past few years as buyer behavior has evolved. We don't necessarily behave in such a linear fashion as has been modeled by Gartner and Serious Decisions and so on. Why did you guys shift to thinking about this as a relationship journey?
It's a good question. We could probably record a whole just conversation strictly on this. So I'm gonna try to keep it brief because I know we want to get into the game show here. But um, it- just really, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and yes, there was a need to sort of uh, build a category, differentiate, etc. But the reality is kind of thinking about, especially with the types of customers that we deal with, which is a lot of very complex sales, enterprise, technical professional services, med tech, biotech, that kind of thing. Um, it's very much traditionally, it still is a relationship game, right? So that's a big part of it. On top of that, if you think about, everybody sort of talks about people do business with who those they know, like, and trust, all this kind of stuff, and it's generally been very fuzzy. But if you really get down to the bottom of it, the relationship at an individual and an organizational level is sort of that is the way to build revenue and drive growth and measure. The problem is it's not very easy, and we're still on this journey. We're figuring a lot of it out, kind of as we go, because it is sort of a little softer and squishier than leads and deals and opportunities, right? And those are important. I think that's also a really important distinction to bring up, which is, you mentioned Serious Decisions, Gartner, etc. Um, yes, it's not linear, and even Gartner, I think their last thing got this weird chart that goes every which way, right? I think everybody at the end of the day knows that buyer journeys and consumer journeys are not linear. I think we got led astray by frameworks that were trying to simplify it, right? But you still need to measure, I think, kind of the traditional, let's say, full funnel in terms of, lead to deal to close, etc. But the problem with looking at it that way is that it tells you what's happening. It doesn't tell you why, right? So let's assume you find, okay, well, um, our historical lead to opportunity rate has been 30% or whatever, and now it's down to 20%. Okay, well, that's a problem. We don't know, but why? Okay,
Why?
maybe you can get down to which channel. Okay, but why? Right, and this is where reframing everything in terms of relationships, I think, at least we believe, is a game changer, because if you think about it that way, you can see, okay, well, what messaging and um, experiences are working and not working to drive this change, right? Why is it 20% versus 30% where it was before?
Right.
And if we think about relationships, thinking about kind of the three main things we look at is what gets people excited, what are people generally skeptical of, and what do people usually question, and who do they question it with, right? So that gets into this whole buying committee thing. So if you address those three things as a marketer, that usually is how you can create messaging and experiences that will drive things forward. But that you have to think about it in that sort of that one-to-one and one-to-many relationship rather than just a deal.
That's intriguing. We're gonna have to unpack that in future shows, and perhaps tuning into your podcast, we'll be able to get more of that as well. But I'm really intrigued about the framework and looking forward to learning more from yourself and Gabby about that. This is good stuff, people. All right, so we are about to put Mike through the gauntlet, the ringer. Yes, we're going to see if
The
we can knock
ringer.
him off his game here. So, Mike, with your permission, we will jump into the first question of the Demand Wars. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do
All
it.
right. Oh, come on. This guy's a combat sports enthusiast, so we might have taken on the wrong person, but let's see what we could do. Okay, so here's the first question, Mike. We call this desert island marketer. So you've been dropped on a desert island. You've got a budget of $1,000 a month. We're going to give you a laptop and internet access. Nothing else. So you got to fish, hunt, take care of all that stuff. But you've been charged with taking a B2B brand to market. How are you going to do it on such a limited budget?
I'm gonna be that difficult guest that's always gonna give you like a it depends answer.
Is that fair?
Um, so it depends on type of company and growth stage, right? So for example, if I'm in the B2B e-commerce game, then I'm going to take that entire budget I'm going to spend it on paid search, as weird as that might sound, right? Because there's got to be some existing demand. You're not getting into the e-com game if there's not some demand out there for the products you sell, whatever. Let's assume it's commercial piping equipment, whatever, right? Like there's already people already buying these products. I'm literally just going to spend that tiny budget on capturing whatever demand I can. Um, if I'm in a if I'm selling a complex service, then I'm probably going to spend that budget on small niche regional conferences. Although if I'm stuck on a desert island, maybe
Yeah.
it's small niche virtual events. If I'm selling software, it's probably um, maybe I'm investing into like especially if it's early stage, like a product hunt campaign or doing like LTV, a lifetime deal on like a AppSumo or whatever, right? Like that kind
Oh,
of thing.
yeah.
So I think again, if those types of things. So
Hmm.
I think it really does depend on if I'm a later stage company, I've already got whatever. Let's assume I'm a $4 billion consulting firm or something, and I just
Right.
have a small marketing team, and I'm looking to do something. Then I'm going to probably do something different. Maybe I will take my one marketer in house and create my podcast at that point to build affinity, right? Because you and I both know you don't have to spend a ton of money these days to spin one up. Now it's going to take promoting it, etc. That maybe that's where your budget gets a little limited, but that's my it depends answer.
Very interesting and really detailed. I like that. So B2B e-commerce differs from selling a complex service, which differs from selling software, especially early stage. If you're later stage, you'll do more affinity building. This is useful. I've heard you talk before, Mike, about the perils of companies perhaps taking advice that they receive maybe on LinkedIn at face value and instead needing to go layers deeper to make sure the nuances are taken into account.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's exactly it. Because again, if you're like we were just talking about, if you're a B2B ecom brand, a lot of the stuff that's out there, LinkedIn is just happens to be very much skewed toward VC backed tech, right? A lot of those things, not that some of the concepts, and this is where mindset, skill sets, tool sets, results even come into play too. Some of the mindsets I think apply, some of the concepts and frameworks might apply, but the actual execution probably doesn't, right? It's just a very different ballgame.
Insightful,
And then again,
insightful.
what's your fund? Like this is where understanding business is important, right? Are you private equity backed versus VC backed? Are you bootstrapped? All those things play a huge part in what you're actually going to do, because that's what's going to drive your business strategy
Makes
in big
sense.
ways.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you for elaborating on that. Okay, so you generated enough pipeline for us to get you off the island. Congratulations. All right, but
Sweet.
yeah, but
Although I
now
kind of like island life. I don't know. I
you,
want to stay there,
you did move to the
even on a
desert.
small budget.
He likes the solitary life. Okay. So we got you off the island now for now. You're on the mainland. But now here's the new challenge. So this one, we're calling 3, 3, and 3. You've got budget, but you have to create that demand fast. And some companies are going through this at the end of a quarter or the end of a fiscal year. So we'd love for you to answer this question three different ways. How would you create demand fast in 3 days, 3 weeks, and then 3 months? So let's tackle 3 days first.
I really love this question because it made me think for a little bit. Um, I think in 3 days, the main thing to consider is you really don't have the time to build a ton of creative, interview customers. You don't have the time to build an audience. So I think the core things I would focus on are taking advantage of an existing captive audience and just doing something big and crazy to get awareness. Because 3 days isn't enough time to build affinity or to build trust. So really, it's about just doing something, for lack of a better word, big and splashy, right? So that might be like going to a large event and activating with like a huge giveaway. And I'm not talking about like, hey, let's give away an iPad. I'm talking like, let's give away a Tesla or something, or again, on a smaller scale, it might be, I kind of mentioned this earlier, it might be like well, let's just run a lifetime deal on AppSumo if it's a software company, or, something like that. But it's got to be taking advantage. I mean, nah, I was about to say like something like creating a commercial, but again, you don't have time to build a creative. So it's just got to be something big and splashy that you can activate on in a very, very short amount of time.
I like the way you're thinking about this, Mike. Giving away a Tesla, that is something that cuts across no, every industry. It doesn't matter what you're selling. It's something that almost everybody would desire. It would certainly get their attention. Sometimes marketers almost find themselves being charged with doing this type of marketing, but what we're doing right now is simulating maybe a fairly unrealistic constraint in that you only have 3 days. So if you've only got 3 days, blow the whole budget. Do the Super Bowl ad, except you don't have time for creative. Do something really, really big. I love how you're thinking about that. What if you had a smidge more time in 3 weeks?
So this is where I would still say 3 weeks. You still don't have a ton of time to really build creative or to test into the right message. Um, I would say you still want to probably, because it's only 3 weeks, if we're sticking with that constraint, I would still do some sort of big splashy giveaway or contest or things like that, whether that's a Tesla or whatever. Let's just, if you're a maybe more well-known brand, then it's, hey, let's give away, whatever, it's some software, maybe lifetime subscriptions to the X number of people or something like that. But then from a promotional perspective, with 3 weeks, you get a bit more flexibility, let's just say. So I would say, um, I would run podcast ads on, I mean, because again, with tools like SparkToro and things like that, you got enough time to do some research. Hopefully you understand your customers at this point already anyway, but if you don't, you've got tools to help you out with that. With 3 weeks, again, if you have, again, there's a lot of it depends stuff in here. If you've got say a fairly well-known founder or person like on the executive team or something, you should be able to, jump on and speak on some podcasts within a 3 week period as well. Be able to do some promotion there. Um, Again, depending on the size of your team, the number of these things you could do is going to vary. Potentially, again, attend a conference and activate in the same way that we talked about within that 3 day period. And then for 3 weeks, I would say it's enough time to do some product marketing type things on social, potentially in promoting that same contest and giveaway, things like that.
Got it. Got it. So some of the same things with a bit more detail as the 3 days, but then a couple more doors start to open here, which is interesting. The idea of a well-known founder speaking is an intriguing one. A lot of companies have founders who are great business minds, but they might not necessarily be in the practice of speaking publicly. Maybe they haven't taken the time to formulate their their TED talk, so to speak, their point of view. Do you tend to see this amongst your clients?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for that matter, I would say, I mean, we do a lot of work in what we call technical professional services. So think like
Mm.
biotech consulting, med tech engineering firms, just more traditional management consulting firms, things like that. And pretty much across the board, I would say that their their leaders they tend to be good speakers, but they're often unknown commodities. commodities. Like, probably not commodities is the wrong word for it, but they're fairly unknown in their relative spaces. They just haven't taken the time to build up that presence.
Right, right, right. Very interesting. Okay, okay. We're going to keep that one in mind. We might circle back to that idea shortly. But for the 3-month period, so now you have an entire quarter, which almost feels like an eternity after we had you operating inside of a box. But you've got 3 months now. How are you creating demand in 3 months?
So here, this is where I think it completely shifts, because in 3 months you can do a lot. Um, Again, in theory, you can do a lot. Larger companies with more bureaucracy, etc., probably 3 months is not a lot of time. But if you're an agile organization or a smaller organization that can be more agile, 3 months is an eternity, I would say. So this is where two things come to mind, and they can even be very much interrelated. One would be some sort of kind of similar to what we're doing right now. I would do some sort of edutainment industry talk show type thing, to build a community and affinity around, and also have like a include some sort of like live Q&A to support the community type thing. So whether that be just Q&A in the chats, whether that be, letting people call in live. We do that in our lives right now. That works really well. Um, but really, again, it's really about, again, kind of coming back to this relationship building thing. 3 months is enough time to do a little bit of research, to do a little bit of creative, and put something and accelerate something in the market that's going to build relationships through kind of a community type thing. The other thing that comes to mind would be, another variation on this would be like hosting some regional micro events live,
Oh,
maybe every 2 weeks or so. Again, this depends on budget, obviously. Um, but and again, I said those could be interrelated. I would then, you can then repurpose those into recorded events. You can still do them live, like both in person and virtual, do like a hybrid thing. And then again, with 3 months, this is a ton of content. Do all the promote the show, repurpose all that content. You can turn it into ads. You can turn it into product marketing content potentially, all that kind of stuff.
fantastic. Sangram Vajre, he currently runs GTM Partners, Go to Market Partners. He's a founder of one of the former leaders of Terminus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he helped found Pardot back in the day, a marketing automation company. This is a play that he's implemented for years. He's doing it right now. He's currently traveling across the United States to help launch this new agency. So I've seen this work for a number of companies, but it's still not that common. Why do you
It's
think there's what's the roadblock?
it's a good question. So interestingly, like, it's something we've thought about, but it's very capital intensive, right? Because you got to travel, you got to
Ah,
hire video crews, you got to all this stuff, right? Um, and it's a big time commitment as well, right? So, for example, if you're doing things virtually, well, okay, I can commit to whatever, even if it's like, say, an hour a week to a live event plus prep plus whatever. Sure, you have to have some post production, etc. But the budget and the time commitment are very different. So, depending on resources, both people resources and uh, capital resources, I think that's a big one. I also think the other one is, I think for a long time, the live in person events started getting a bad rap because they've all turned into kind of the same boring old thing of, hey, let's just get in front of a group of people and share some PowerPoint slides.
yeah.
And I think, granted, virtual events are kind of like that too, but um, I think that's another potential reason. But
Yeah,
then
that is
logistics too. That's the other thing. Like, you got to find an event venue. You got to,
true.
find food, all this kind of stuff. I mean, we've we've hosted smaller things just on a more of a one-off basis, like client summits, employee summits, things like that, and it's a lot of freaking work.
This is a really fair point. And when executed correctly, it does work. But you're right. It is intensive on all of those dimensions that you pointed out. Okay, that's fair enough. So that was pretty good, Mike. You got us through the three, three, and three. Now I think the marketers listening have some creative ideas as to how they could create demand if they have a time pinch or if they have a little bit more time to work with. I'd love to transition us now, Mike, into this concept that we've been hearing for the last year, year and a half in the marketing world, particularly on LinkedIn. It's the idea of marketing like a media company. So some people, when they hear that, they think Netflix, Amazon Prime, HBO, Disney. I'd love to hear Proof Point Marketing's perspective on what it means to successfully market like a media company.
First thing I'd like to throw out there, if I may, is I don't think it's for everybody. Kind of going back to what type of company and what stage you're in, I think is really critical to understand and what the business objectives are. Like if your goal is to grow at whatever, I'm gonna make this up. Let's assume you're a $10 million company and your goal is to grow at 10% a year in kind of perpetuity. You don't need to do this. It's a waste of your time and money, right? But if you are a $10 million company, your goal is to grow at 100% a year or more, different story, right? Or if you're a $2 billion company and your goal is to grow at 20%, right? That the nominal figure is still huge. So I think that's an important distinction to make first before kind of people jump into this,
Right.
because I see a lot of people, like a lot of companies, just jumping on this bandwagon and doing it, and some of them it's like, well, what, why are you spending your time and effort doing this? But to answer your question, the what it looks like is at the end of the day, it's about creating a content experience property that educates, entertains, etc., where you're creating valuable content for your audience that builds trust and affinity, etc. And it can't. And this is where the general conversations about, well, it's kind of the content needing to be treated like a product. Um, I think it's an important concept, and I think it really is it can't be fluff. It can't be like your industry 101 stuff that most companies have on their blog, that kind of thing. It really needs to be creative, different take. You also have to, the other thing to point out, I think, is you have to have a unique point of view to do this, whether it's in the way you present the information or in the information itself. If you don't have either of those things, like it's just not going to be successful. So like, again, this example of what you're doing right now is perfect, right? It's tons of marketing podcasts out there. I don't know of any one of them that's treating it like a game show, right? So it's a creative way to share. Maybe I'm not the first person to talk about any of this stuff either, right? But you're going to take this and combine it with a bunch of other people, and you're going to put it in a very different spin. This is what um, uh, marketing like a media company looks like. What we're doing right now. But again, I don't think it's for everybody.
Right. That's an interesting perspective. I wonder if we could dig into that a little bit more, Mike, to sort of understand maybe some of the pitfalls. Let's say we are that $10 million a year company that's only pursuing modest growth. Why might the media company route not be an efficient use of our resources?
Because if your goal, whatever, I mean, again, look, again, to a certain extent, it probably depends on the type of $10 million company as well. But
Mm-hmm.
um, let's just say it's a consulting group or heck, even a software company that sells to enterprise, right? Where you're getting 100K ACV plus, right? 100 million. If you're at $10 million, your goal is to grow 10% a year. That means you only need one net new deal that entire year. You don't need to build a media company to get one new deal. Like it'll be cheaper for you to probably just hire another salesperson. And I'm not saying that's what you should do, but you could comparatively just do that and have them go outbound, right? Uh, it if your goal is to only grow 10% a year, especially if you're in a established market, there's probably enough demand out there for you to just go and capture. You don't need to create a whole bunch of net new demand. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, but it doesn't mean you have to, right? And you
Yeah.
can do it in a much more scaled down version. Maybe it's just activating better at conferences, right?
Right.
Maybe it's putting on a quarterly virtual event of your own, right? Now you can. Some might argue, well, that's acting like a media company, maybe, but like media company to me is both uh, content quality and volume. Like you don't, there's not a single media company out there that's only putting out a quarterly thing.
True.
That's daily and weekly.
True.
So that's why.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I want to ask a related question though. This is one that we're calling the sunken place. And it's this difficult place some B2B marketers find themselves where they've determined, okay, I ought to be spending more on creating demand in my marketplace. To your point, some marketplaces have so much existing demand, marketers are better off just capturing what's there. But for those who have determined, okay, I need to go create, I need to go win hearts and minds, but they are still being measured on demand capture. How many MQLs, marketing attributable pipeline? How can they make that transition to demand creation programs without losing their jobs?
That's an interesting one. It's something we do all the time as an agency. So I think step one is it's making sure you don't have a leaky bucket, like making sure
Mm,
that your demand capture strategies and tactics and everything are as foolproof as they can be, right? So simple things like, is your website optimized, right? Is it fast? Does it have clear CTAs? Is your messaging clear? All this kind of stuff I would say comes first, right? The messaging one is actually a really, really important one. You see a lot of people, again, kind of going at this, uh, marketing like a media company and spending a lot of dollars on quote unquote awareness or demand creation without having a clear message. And then you go and you're like, I don't even know what you do. I see you have a podcast, but I have no clue what you do. And I don't think your audience does either. So the messaging, the go to market message is probably the most important. Like make sure that's shored up. Without that, your demand capture won't work either at the end of the day.
yeah.
Um, so, and then shore up all your demand capture stuff. That's sort of table stakes, I guess. From there, I think there's a couple things I want to dig into. One is this whole MQL and gated content piece, which again, the general, if you go to LinkedIn, almost everybody says ungate everything, MQLs are crap, gated content's awful, etc., etc. I disagree. And I'm probably going to I may or may not get flamed for this, but I'm going to go there anyway. And here's why. I disagree because MQLs are only as bad as their definition. So yeah, if your definition of an MQ as their definition and how they are processed after they commit. So if your definition is anybody with a heartbeat that downloads an ebook and your post MQL process is to just kick it over to the sales team, yeah, that's crap. Totally agree. On the flip side, if your MQL definition is somebody that matches ICP and is showing a level of intent based on what they are engaging with, and your post process for that is giving them more opportunities to engage and learn about you, whether on a indirect or direct level. So then that's a different story, right? So I'll give you an example. For a client of ours, They are in the med tech product development engineering space. Okay, they're a consulting group. Um, product product requirements are a necessity. Everybody's got to go through them if you're going to develop a med tech product. It's a pain in the butt. You got to do it for FDA approval, etc. And you can screw it up pretty easily, like not put in the right information. It can also mess you up further down from a development. I'm not going to go into the details. Most people probably don't care about that side of things. Point is, it's what we had what we developed with them is a product development or product requirements development guide, right? That somebody can download. So what does that tell? And it was gated. Here's why. A couple reasons. One is a lot of these startups that are doing this. Let's assume it's a startup in the medtech space. They're in stealth mode. You have no idea who they are. Can't target them. So you need to create some way for them to engage with you in something that's valuable that shows, hey, I have a project I am working on. All right. Then you connect that to a thing like, hey, thanks. There's a couple of things. One is there's a podcast related to it that we would then retarget them with. There's a event. We haven't done this yet, but potential events that we're going to do that are related to this. Like, hey, if you want a more detailed, we'll be walked through how to do this, attend this event. And then it's a thing like, which again, this is in the works. It's a thing like, hey, if you want, you can jump on with one of our engineers for an hour, and we'll help walk you through any of the questions or pitfalls you might have. Right. So that's it's not a sales conversation. It's let us help you. It might turn into one. Right. So things like that, like what is an MQL? What is gated content? And what are you doing with it? Right. So again, this gets into our whole thing of building relationships at scale. This is where that mindset shifts. My goal is to build a relationship with it rather than make a sale. So having that different mindset allows me to have a very different definition of an MQL, allows me to have a very different process for what I do with that quote unquote MQL. And it works. So, and that then gets you into that next stage of, all right, we can now have events, we can layer podcasts on top of this. And over time, you're continuing this journey of driving pipeline while you're layering in demand creation on top of it. And that sort of takes you to that transition, if you will. But that first step is reframing what is an MQL and what should it be and what you should do with it. And that gets into, again, mindsets.
Reframing what an MQL is. Yeah, the term MQL has become synonymous in a lot of areas with poorly defined. It's almost like demand desperation. Sales has complained we don't have enough
I like
pipeline.
that.
Marketing loosens the definition of an MQL just so that they reach
It's
that.
usually pretty loose in the first place is the problem.
Right. Exactly. And the result is sales doesn't think marketing is worth their salt. Um, and yeah, it's just a vicious cycle.
Well, and the
So,
fight is always, and what we find is in this kind of example I share with you, the fight is always, oh, well, they downloaded this thing. Let me just have them talk to our sales. No, please
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Don't do
yeah,
that. They're not
yeah.
telling you they're ready for a sales conversation.
That's right.
The only thing you know at that point is they have a project they're working on. They have a problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah, yeah.
So take it step by step, right? It's sort of that, if you think about relationships,
Mhm.
it's all about first date, second date, etc. If you're thinking about personal romantic relationships, right? You don't go first. I mean, okay, some people, there's this whole thing of, love at first sight will propose. That's an exception to the rule, right? Most people, it's first date, second date,
Yep,
move in together, all this kind of stuff. It's
yep.
really no different in business.
Yeah, I like that. Mike, I'm gonna take the liberty of asking you if I were trying to create a demand creation plan for the new year, recognizing that my acquisition plans need to include demand capture as well as demand creation. We're focusing on the demand creation portion. What are maybe 5 things that I should consider including in my plan?
Including demand capture or just demand creation
So,
strictly.
yeah, just so aside from demand capture, which we assume will have its own
Yeah,
elaborate, detailed plan, on the demand creation side.
I think it's a lot of the to a certain extent. There's the it depends answer, right?
Hmm.
What type of company are you? But in general, I think it's a lot of things we've talked about, right?
Mm,
It's um, something that's I would say well, video first in terms of creating, putting faces to names and connecting them to the company brand. So that could be podcast, it could be lives, courses, or another, I think, one that's fairly unexplored in the B2B space outside of coaching. Um, uh, in the there's certain industries where there's more of that, like in the medical space, where there's like continuing education credits. It's more it there's a lot of that there, but outside of that, you don't see a lot of companies doing courses, which I think is a big miss, actually. Um, Things like, again, what we were just talking about, something, if we want to call it mid funnel, but guides, playbooks, templates that can possibly be gated. They don't have to be, but they can be, depending on your audience, where you're in, what you need, etc. And honestly, number one, probably should have mentioned this first, is customer research. Like that has to be part of your demand creation plan. Like, I don't care how well you think you already know your customers. I don't care how much customer research you've already done. You need more, right? And whether now again, some of these things can act as your customer kind of continuous customer insight
right.
lever, if you will, like a podcast, for example, or community. Um, but outside of that, like you have to prioritize just being able to talk to customers on a consistent basis because things change.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm aware that Proofpoint does spend a lot of time on customer research at the beginning of your engagements. You all spoke with Ryan Paul Gibson on your podcast about customer
Yep.
research. I think conceptually, us marketers know what customer research is and acknowledge it's important. But for some reason, it seems that between the marketers and maybe even executives in the company, we seem to have a fair amount of comfort with making assumptions about our audience and running on those assumptions. What do you think causes that?
It's a good question. I think part of it at this point, like today, is it's sort of almost like become quote unquote best practice, right? So
Hmm.
kind of like a tactical example we can go back to as well. Why do people think gated content is bad and the MQL is bad? Well, it's
Yeah.
for this exact reason. It's people create it and do the follow up process based on unfounded and untested assumptions about the intent, right? And then they complain about, well, why are these not converting to sales? Well, it's because the assumption that just because somebody downloaded this thing, they have their inner ICP is bogus, right? As an example. Um, I think a lot of it is also fear. You see this a lot where with enterprise organizations where sales owns the customer relationships, and getting customer interviews in those organizations is like pulling teeth. And oftentimes it's, well, you know, we don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
We're about to go into renewal.
Yeah. Yeah.
They maybe didn't have the best experience recently. My answer to that is, look, if you're that scared that getting insights from your customers, you're going to lose a whole bunch of them, you have a whole different set of problems,
That's very true. That is very true.
right? So that maybe in that case, it's like, okay, don't have us talk to your customers. You should go talk to them and find out
You
what the
go talk
problems
to them.
are.
Yeah.
you know, um, but I think it's a lot of kind of operating from fear of, well, we don't want to bother them, right? Um, and this gets into again relationships. If you've built a solid relationship, you should be able to have a small ask, and a decent portion of your customers be able to get, yeah, sure, no problem. Like, are you going to be doing this with every single customer on a weekly or monthly basis? No, they probably hate you for it. But if you do it, whatever, once a year, once every few years with a small percentage of your customer base, that shouldn't be a problem if you've built the relationships. But again, the problem is most companies don't build relationships. And I think it's endemic in the software space because it's all about, uh, it's like you make the sale and then you reach out to them again when it's renewal time. There's no relationship being built outside of, like, are they using the platform or not?
Yeah.
So, and again, when I say relationships, I don't mean that you should have customer success reaching out to every single customer on a weekly or monthly basis necessarily. There's different ways to build those relationships. Again, all the ways that we talked about: podcasts, communities, events, yada, 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 right? But if the only interaction that they have is sale and then renewal, yeah, those are not the types of customers you can really feel comfortable having an ask of.
Yeah.
One other one I'll throw out there, which relates to fear, is uh, businesses that are more transactional in nature tend to have this fear even more, right? Because, oh well, it's a transaction, we're a commodity, uh, right? But even in those instances, if you do the right things, you can build a relationship, or at least a certain percentage of your customer base. You should be able to ask that with no repercussions.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. That's definitely one for us to think on. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. We have just one or two more questions for you, Mike. I want to put us into a segment that we call One Gotta Go. This one elicits a lot of, there's going to be a lot of commenting on this one. We're going to give you a list of 3 items, and you get to keep 2 of them. One gotta go. All right. You ready, Mike?
I am ready. I love this one.
All right, cool. Here we go. Marketing ops expertise, performance marketing expertise, customer insight expertise. One got to go.
I think you already know my answer to this because I commented on your LinkedIn post about it. This has to be, and it depends because it very much depends on in my mind, at least, on the growth stage of the company.
Yeah.
So I'll try to briefly define it. If you are very early stage, I'm talking like early, you could do without marketing ops. You could hack it together. You could figure things. You just need the basics. Like, you don't need fancy integrations and all this kind of stuff. On the flip side, you can't get by without customer insight expertise. Like, that's the main thing you need in an early stage company. You need to really deeply understand your customer. You won't be able to build, product market fit, all this kind of stuff without it. And I would say you need the performance marketing angle because that's how you're going to capture existing demand in that market. You just can't get it. You can't get away without it. Mid stage, I would say you could potentially, like, if I had to pick one, I would say you can get away without customer insight expertise, at least for a period of time, because you should have built that up in the early stages. And now you need to operationalize. So you have to get marketing ops involved, and you have to build systems, and you have to connect all your tools and your tech stack, and create processes, all this kind of fun stuff. And you still need that performance marketing aspect of things, both from a demand creation and if you're doing demand capture, and from a demand creation perspective, because you need to be able to distribute the content well. So you still need that expertise. Late stage, I actually think this one's tough. You need marketing ops. There's no question. Like, there's just, I mean, you look at some of these, billion-dollar companies, the number of tools they have and the number of people involved in the data science teams and all this kind of, like, you need the marketing ops, and it's even more getting into rev ops side of things. I still think it's probably, I can go either way, either performance or performance marketing or customer insights. You could, in theory, outsource either of those if you're a large organization later stage.
Interesting. This is good. I think you had something for everyone. Resonance. So reach, recall, and resonance. One got to go.
To a certain extent, there's, and it depends here too in terms of growth stage.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say reach. Now, obviously, we're not saying you have zero reach, because if you have zero reach, then none of this matters.
Yep, yep,
Um, but I would say reach, because at the end of the day, uh, resonance and recall are what's going to drive uh, relationships and in turn revenue. So I could deal with fewer relationships, but having them be quality ones
yeah, yeah.
versus pretty much, say, tons of connections, but no relationships. Because that's what reach gets you. Reach without recall and resonance doesn't matter in my mind.
Got it. Got it. I gotta squeeze one more in. This is too good. I gotta squeeze one more in, Mike. All right, let me
Go
give you
for it.
a list of three more: lead scoring, lead nurturing, and intent data. One gotta go.
For me, it's lead scoring. I think lead scoring in virtually every single company I have looked at is way overcomplicated and means absolutely nothing because it's completely arbitrary. It's like, oh, these page visits get 10 points versus these page visits get 1 point. Why? Who says? Like, or this download gets 50 versus this download gets 10. Whatever. At the end of the day, really, the only thing that matters is the high intent form submit, and are people viewing your certain types of content, and are they staying long enough on your site? Like, you don't need lead scoring.
Right.
It's too arbitrary and leads, I think, to really poor decisions and really, pardon my French, hopefully I can swear, shitty automation. And again, this gets into this whole thing of like a bunch of assumptions being made that are not actually founded in anything that's been tested or
Yep.
proven.
Yep.
Right? There's no hypothesis. No one's ever said, oh, well, this page is more important, is 10x more important than this other one. Let's find out.
Yeah.
No one ever does. No one ever tests it. They just assume it and put it into motion and
That's right.
let their marketing automation platform do its thing. And
You heard it here. Straight from Mike's mouth. I love it, and I completely agree. I was doing lead scoring 15 years ago in Eloqua, and we thought it was bleeding edge then. But companies are still doing the exact same practices 15 years later, and buyers have matured. So, yeah, we got to get off of the lead scoring.
yep,
Folks, you've been listening to the Mike Grinberg, founder and CEO of Proofpoint Marketing, together with his wife, Gabby. They run Proofpoint and they're doing an amazing job. Mike, thank you for coming on the Demand Wars.
Balaji's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and this has been fun. I'm
Awesome.
looking forward to seeing the episodes once they go live.
This is going to be good. I appreciate it. This was fun. All right, folks, we will see you on the next episode of the Demand Wars. Bye for now.